Num mundo cada vez mais pressionado pelas mudanças climáticas e pelo desperdício de recursos, o programa Ambiente dos EEA Grants é uma resposta de esperança e ação. Trouxemos mais do que soluções ambientais. Trouxemos esperança. Esperança de que podemos restaurar o equilíbrio entre o ser humano e a natureza. Durante estes anos, ajudámos a preservar a biodiversidade, a restaurar rios e florestas, a combater as alterações climáticas, mas, acima de tudo, ajudamos as comunidades a prosperar. Cada projeto apoiado transformou realidades. Das zonas rurais às cidades, capacitámos pessoas para cuidarem do seu território, criámos empregos verdes, fomentámos a educação ambiental e fortalecemos laços entre a sociedade e o ambiente. Este impacto vê-se nas novas gerações, que crescem conscientes da importância de proteger o nosso planeta. Vê-se nas empresas que adotaram práticas sustentáveis, nas autarquias que implementaram políticas inovadoras e nos cidadãos que, agora, sentem que têm as ferramentas para fazer a diferença. A economia circular é o nosso caminho para um futuro mais sustentável. Com cada garrafa de plástico que retorna, com cada edifício construído de forma mais eficiente, estamos a reimaginar a forma como usamos os recursos. Menos desperdício, mais valor. É assim que inspiramos uma nova mentalidade, onde o impacto positivo se estende a todos os setores da economia. E em cada uma das 12 reservas da biosfera de Portugal, vimos o verdadeiro potencial do nosso capital natural. Nestes territórios únicos, a natureza floresce em harmonia com as comunidades locais, criando laboratórios vivos de sustentabilidade e atraindo novos olhares para o futuro. O legado do programa Ambiente não é apenas um planeta mais saudável, é uma comunidade mais forte, mais informada e mais resiliente. Juntos, construímos um futuro onde o ambiente e a sociedade caminham de mãos dadas rumo a um amanhã mais verde. Working together for a green and competitive Europe.
Muito bom dia.
Good morning.
Sejam bem-vindos
Welcome
à Sala
to
O Século e à Secretaria-Geral do Ambiente. Nos últimos 30 anos, Portugal tem sido um dos países beneficiários do mecanismo financeiro do Espaço Económico Europeu, também conhecido por EEA Grants. Os EEA Grants são uma importante ferramenta de cooperação internacional e de financiamento, com uma linha de investimento fortemente dedicada à área do ambiente. O período de financiamento que agora encerra foi formalmente iniciado a 22 de maio de 2017
and started a path of challenges, a lot of work, dedication, and a true involvement in the cause of fighting climate change and defending the environment, with the Secretary General for the Environment taking the management of this environment program.
Com total de 60 projetos apoiados, o Programa Ambiente, designado por Programa Ambiente, Alterações Climáticas e Economia de Baixo Carbono, teve como grandes linhas de atuação a proteção dos ecossistemas, a transição para uma economia circular e de baixo carbono e o incentivo à inovação aplicada. Hoje festejamos e celebramos o encerramento destes 60 projetos, a diversidade de ideias que nos trouxeram, as experiências vividas por todos os envolvidos e celebramos ainda o empenho na criação de respostas
answers that bring us solutions for the future. Today we are highlighting the impact of applied innovation on the community and how this allows us to think and put into practice solutions for climate change, scarcity of resources and pollution. Today we emphasize the involvement of citizens and local communities in EEA grant projects as a response to climate change and environmental change policies that we hope will help us conciliate with nature and the planet.
Portal único que agrega toda a informação relativa às reservas da biosfera que temos em Portugal, e estamos a falar de reservas da biosfera que abrangem 12% do território nacional. Tivemos também um outro domínio de intervenção com vários projetos relativos à economia circular no setor da construção e dos plásticos. E, neste caso, eu destacaria o projeto que deu origem à publicação da legislação relativa ao sistema de depósito e retorno das embalagens de plástico. Portanto, foi um projeto determinante para que Portugal passasse a ter uma legislação que era necessária, que não existia e que sem os EEA Grants não teríamos chegado aqui.
Um dos objetivos estratégicos dos EEA Grants é o reforço da cooperação bilateral entre Portugal e a Noruega, a Islândia e o Liechtenstein. Qual é o balanço que faz dessa cooperação bilateral durante este mecanismo?
O EEA Grants tem dois grandes objetivos. O primeiro, reduzir as disparidades económicas e sociais entre países, e o segundo, reforçar as relações bilaterais entre Noruega, Islândia e Liechtenstein e Portugal. Pretende fortalecer as relações entre países, apoiando projetos inovadores e projetos que têm resultados tangíveis em qualquer área, desde que haja, lá está, o interesse bilateral. Posso dizer que o vosso programa Ambiente tem vindo a desenvolver um conjunto de atividades extremamente interessantes ao longo deste mecanismo financeiro.
O que achas para o futuro? Achas que vai ser reforçada essa cooperação? Como é que vai ser reforçada?
Eu diria que os resultados que nós conseguimos atingir no âmbito do atual mecanismo financeiro são resultados extremamente positivos. Nós tivemos 410 projetos apoiados em todo o mecanismo financeiro, mais 116 iniciativas no âmbito do Fundo de Relações Bilaterais, e no programa Ambiente foram 60 os projetos apoiados, que permitiram alcançar, lá está, resultados muito interessantes na área da economia circular, no combate às alterações climáticas, neutralidade carbónica e, portanto, mais as reservas da biosfera, naturalmente, e por isso eu diria que todas as parcerias que foram criadas no âmbito dos vossos projetos, foram 29 projetos com parceiros da Noruega, são parcerias que não só foram criadas, mas que no âmbito destas atividades bilaterais que têm vindo a ser desenvolvidas, são parcerias que vão ser reforçadas e fortalecidas. Portanto, temos aqui boas ideias e bons resultados e esperamos que o próximo mecanismo financeiro possa continuar com este importante apoio para Portugal, nomeadamente na área do ambiente.
To open this session, we now invite the Secretary General for the Environment, Mr. Marco Rebello, to take the floor. Good morning, everyone. Madam Ambassador of Norway in Portugal, Mr. Bresletto, Coordinator of the National Management Unit, Mrs. Mineiro, dear Program Partner Innovation Norway, Magna Rodley, other representatives of public and private entities, all participants, dear promoters and partners of projects, dear colleagues. It is with a feeling of proud that I would like to start this opening session of the closing of the environmental program of climate change and low carbon economy, an important day. Today we are celebrating it in this historic room, the end of 5 intense work years, but very intense, but very gratifying. And by celebrating this, I think it's about time to take stock of what the program did. In the past 5 years, the program Environment supported pilot projects, that's experimental programs for alternative solutions to real problems that affect the environment, but also the people in Portugal. And we did this in 3 different areas. In the sector of circular economy, namely construction and reduction of plastics, conservation of nature, namely reserves of biosphere, and finally mitigation adaptation to climate change. The environmental program was designed in the logic of complementary financing, community and national, taking into account the options and possibilities of funding in the environmental fund, an operational program for sustainability and efficiency in the use of resources, and other operational programs of PT 2020. So it was with the purpose of overcoming lack of funding that we designed this program, the VA grant program, and we did this with support to living laboratories for mitigation of climate change in cities with over 200,000 inhabitants, or the pilot deposit and return systems for drinks and cans, for beverages and cans. Now, if we can celebrate today, it's because when we take stock, we realize that the results were, the outcomes were much better than expected. 60 projects, as we said, and in 29 of 34 indicators, we exceeded the targets we had set ourselves. We were able to create 48 jobs. Over 5 million people in Portugal, in a population of 10 million, benefited from adaptation, projects of adaptation to climate change. We established a deposit return system of beverage that will come into force in 2026. The Seira River Basin was recovered in 50% of its extension after the fires of 2017. We have created a single portal for the 12 biosphere reserves. We are talking about 12 biosphere reserves that cover 12% of the national territory, over 10,000 species in that territory, and much more was achieved in these 5 years. And further ahead, you'll have the opportunity to realize this. So the environment, the population at large are benefiting from these projects, even if they don't immediately realize it. I would also like to stress another aspect. We were able, at the same time, to continue investment made in previous funding years, and achieve results achieved in other periods, namely adaptation to climate change, the creation of the ADAPT network, following the ADAPT local program, and during this period, following approval of the local climate change adaptation strategies, it was possible to create concrete measures that materialize the previous strategies, guides and manuals of good practice for regularizing riverbanks, risk management plans, handbooks or manuals for river watches, among others. It was possible to develop the national roadmap for adaptation 2100, which defined narratives of the evolution of vulnerabilities and impacts of climate change, as well as assessing investment needs for adaptation. And very important, we have identified the socio-economic costs of inaction for the regions of mainland Portugal. Another important success indicator in the program was the interest raised with the program developers. The demand was way above the funds available, and namely as regards adaptation local projects, but also the development of sustainable development projects for the biosphere reserves, projects for reduction of plastic marine litter, and others for applying circular economy in construction. We have an interesting set of projects that have added value to the economy, to the society, and to the country as a whole. In certain cases, some of the companies we have supported would not have developed innovative projects without this support. And this is because the support given by the grants enabled them to significantly reduce the risk related to innovation. So now this is also time to think about the future. In the beginning of next year, a new funding period begins. The proposal we are presenting aims to help accelerate the green transition towards a more sustainable society. And it will be based on 3 pillars: the people at the center fighting climate change, and the attraction of investment in line with the National Energy and Climate Plan 2030, the Basic Law on Climate, and the revision of the Roadmap for Carbon Neutrality. As you know, we face a triple planetary crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, which calls for an acceleration of the green transition. The Green Transition Programme area aims to support transition to climate neutrality by 2045 through the implementation of the EU Green Deal and its targets and obligations. For the next funding period, you are all called. Citizens, NGOs, private and public sector should come together to overcome the challenges we are facing in order to achieve the objectives of the program. Public institutions, to begin with, the government and the administration at all levels, but mostly private entities, the NGOs, including donor countries, as the main agents of change. I mean, these ones that carry out projects on field and that bring about the necessary change. Before I close, I'd like to make some acknowledgements. An acknowledgement to the donors, namely to Norway, for its generosity and commitment towards common causes. And I also like to thank, and because in the environmental program bilateral cooperation is a key aspect, I must thank the developers and partners from the 29 projects that involve partnerships in Norway and Iceland, as well as Innovation Norway partner, whom I thank and praise for all the support and constant learning and sharing. Also, an acknowledgement to all other project developers that even without partnerships in the other countries have brought about their projects, without whom nothing would have been possible. Also, an acknowledgement, she's not here, but Marisa Silva, represented here by a colleague from the GPM. And so I thank this political management Director General of Environmental Policy that contribute to development of these programs. I also like to mention the good relationship and sharing of good practices with programs of culture and conciliation and gender equality. Also very important, the national liaison officer, always present and available to help us be more rigorous. So the National Management Unit, Maria Mineiro, and your predecessor, Susana Ramos. And a word of thanks also to my predecessor, Alexandra Carvalho. She contributed from the first time, from the first moment, to create all necessary conditions to the success of this program. She contributed much more than I to the success of this program. And in conclusion, a word of thanks to Susana Scaria and her team for the commitment, dedication, were absolutely overwhelming. Your perseverance in times of adversity are an example that I can only ambition to achieve. Thank you again. I wish you a good working session, and I hope you will enjoy the day, as I will certainly will.
Seguida, convidamos a usar da palavra.
We then invite the coordinator of the National Management Unit for the EEA grants in Portugal, Maria Mineiro.
Muito bom dia a todos e a todas. Cumprimento em particular.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to particularly greet the Norwegian ambassador to Portugal, Anne Brusleto. I would like to particularly greet Mark Rebelo, General Secretary for the Environment, and the entire staff of this secretary. They have been the operators of the program. I would like to greet Innovation Norway, our partner, DGPM, particularly Ruta Cis and Tiago Portugal. They are key partners for the environmental program, and I would like to greet all the partners and beneficiaries. As coordinator of the National Management Unit for the EEA grants, it is a pleasure for me to take part in this closing event. This is a landmark event because we'll have the opportunity to take stock of the performance of the program throughout the current financing period. The EEA grants have two overall goals. On one hand, to reduce the social economic disparities between countries, and secondly, to strengthen the bilateral cooperation between countries. 2024 has been a very important year. This financing mechanism was signed in 1992 between the EU member states and Norway, Liechtenstein and Iceland, but it only came into force later. We are celebrating 30 years of the EEA grants. We are reaching the end of the current financing mechanism. 102.7 million euros is the total envelope scattered across 5 programs: Blue Growth, Environment, Culture, Gender Equality, and support to civil society. Regarding the environmental program, it supported 60 projects, out of which 29 with Norwegian partners. 25.5 million euros were allocated. 3 key goals: to promote circular economy, to enhance the value of the territory, promoting sustainable biosphere reserves, and the decarbonization of society by increasing the resilience to climate change. Alongside all these programs, we have the Bilateral Relations Fund, directly managed by my unit. It has an allocation of 3 million euros. It supported and continues to support bilateral initiatives between Portugal, Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, provided that there's innovation and tangible results. So, in addition to the 60 projects supported under the environmental program, there are some other projects being supported through the Bilateral Relations Fund. These 60 projects financed by the EEA grants in the environmental area allowed us to exceed many of the indicators suggested. I would like just to highlight some of the important outcomes. An increase by 60% of materials reuse, 230 total CO2 emissions reduction by 2 tons per year. We enhanced the value of 12 biosphere reserves, which benefited over 280,000 people, leading to the establishment of a single platform that congregates all the information related to this heritage. We also recovered 50% of the territories covered by the wildfires in the Verve Basin of Ceira. Regarding the bilateral cooperation between Portugal and the donor countries, let me come back to the importance of the Fund for the Bilateral Relations. I would like to highlight some key initiatives between Portugal and Norway, including the Green Deal, circular economy, and adaptation to climate change. Last September, we organized an initiative in Bergen within the scope of the circular economy applied to the construction sector. This was a matchmaking event organized by the operator of the program and Innovation Norway. It allowed for the matchmaking between 2 clusters, the PropTech innovation and sustainable innovation in Portugal. So a set of Portuguese companies and technological centers tried to make use of solutions within the circular economy, promoting the cooperation between the 2 countries. The results were excellent. and the environmental program with Innovation Norway, along with these two clusters, are preparing a visit of the Norwegian companies to Portugal for a second edition of this matchmaking initiative. So this was indeed a very successful initiative. So at the end of January 2025, we will have a second edition of matchmaking. Furthermore, there was a strong participation in the forum to discuss adaptation to the climate change. It took place in southern Portugal this year to adapt, to promote adaptation to climate change at a local level. It included visits to projects supporting the Blue Book document developed by the donor countries. Key areas are green transition in Europe, democracy and human rights, resilience and social inclusion. Resilience and social inclusion. In the meantime, there was a kick-off meeting that took place in October this year in Coimbra, and Portugal put forward some priorities and objectives, including to continue focusing on the current areas: the sea, environment, culture and gender equity and equality, in taking into account its relevance. On top of that, we suggested a new area of intervention, which is access to justice and improvement of reintegration services. We also hope to scale up some projects which have been successful. We also want to invest in innovative actions that will be able to increase the visibility of the impact, and we hope to count on the strong participation of all the partners. We are looking forward to formally kick off the negotiations for the new mechanism in 2025 by ensuring the continuity of this key strategic financing support to Portugal. Finally, I would like to reiterate that it's important to build up on the best practice, and the environmental program already of the good and best practice that should be kept down the road, and we have also identified some areas for improvement. It's important to keep our focus on climate change, enhancing the cultural value of the territory, and building up on what we have achieved so far. We can try to develop a roadmap in order to leverage the outcomes. Secondly, it's important to reiterate the relevance of the partnerships and synergies that emerge within this program. Once again, I would like to underline the important role of Innovation Norway from the very onset, because this cooperation between partner and program operator has enabled the development of bilateral initiatives, achieving the expected results by the end of the financing mechanism period. Our overall goal is to make sure that the outcomes achieved by the beneficiaries and the partners have long-lasting impact on businesses, communities, and people. So it's very important for us to preserve the legacy of the EEA grants in order to ensure a greener, more inclusive, and more competitive Europe in the long run. This is one of the overarching goals of this initiative. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the work carried out by the entire staff. All those that were with us in the past are with us now. They have been key to achieve the results. I would like to thank Marco Rebelo, Susana Scaria, and their teams. I would like to particularly greet and acknowledge the work done by Susana. Resilience has been key to overcome all the challenges that we faced since the very beginning. I would like to also to acknowledge the cooperation with Innovation Norway, FMO, donor countries, the other programs, and the cooperation and coordination from the Norwegian Embassy in Lisbon. We look forward to see the outcome of this project, and we do hope that we all have a fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
A terminar esta sessão de abertura, convidamos
To conclude the opening session, we would like to give the floor to the Norwegian ambassador in Portugal.
Thank you. Muito obrigada, and good morning, everyone. Dear Mr. Marco Rebelo, Secretary General for the Environment, dear Mrs. Maria Mineiro, Head of the National Focal Point EEA Grants Portugal, distinguished guests, dear friends. I'm very pleased to be here with you today to celebrate the closing of the Environment Programme. As Maria told about, we are currently closing our financial mechanism of the EEA grants and are starting to discuss the following funding period. Therefore, this is the perfect occasion to look back into what we have achieved, but also to reflect on how much still needs to be done in this policy field. The EEA grants have for a long time been a crucial instrument in supporting innovative environment policies and projects in Portugal. From climate adaptation planning to pilot adaptation solutions, from valorization of biosphere reserves to testing of decarbonization solutions in urban laboratories. On the promotion of circular economy from the construction sector to the deposit and return of cans and bottles, and also the reduction of marine litter. Finally, through very interesting bilateral initiatives and many projects with donor project partners that have contributed to strengthening the cooperation between our countries in this policy field. Cooperation is the key word. Dear friends, the scale of the environmental challenges we and the future generations are facing far exceeds our national borders. International cooperation is essential to address global and complex environmental issues, from climate change mitigation to plastic pollution and biodiversity loss. For Norway, the cooperation with Portugal and the EU in this area is invaluable. The same goes for agencies like the donor program partners Innovation Norway, and for the public agencies, universities, research institutions, and companies that were project partners under this program. I am sure that there is still a great need and a wide field of opportunities for further environmental cooperation between our countries, both in and outside of the EEA grants scope. I want to express my appreciation to the Secretary General for the Environment and your team for the great work you have done in managing the program and in publicizing its results. That is also very important. This appreciation also extends to the National Focal Point, to the FMO, and to Innovation Norway. I can see two of you in the front seat, for all your support and cooperation. And last but not least, to all the project promoters and partners, without whose initiatives and dedication, none of this would have been possible. The results you all achieved with this EEA grant-supported program are indeed impressive. Portugal can count on Norway and the EEA grants to continue supporting the path towards our greater common goals, the green transition, democracy, rule of law and human rights, and social inclusion and resilience. Thank you very much.
Senhora Embaixadora, muito obrigada pelas suas palavras.
Dear Ambassador, thank you very much for your remarks. This brings us to the end of the opening session. Now we would like to introduce you Joana Guerra Tadeu, a prominent voice in the public arena for the informed, conscious and ingenious as she formulates the problems and solutions to environmental problems. Known as the imperfect environmentalist, she seeks to work with and sensitive those who listen to her to adhere to a response that is not only individual but essentially collective to the climate crisis. Joana Tadeu has a background in communication science and has been working on climate matters since 2015. We have launched the challenge. How do you see the environment program? Joana, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Olá, bom dia a todas e a todos. Vocês não vão acreditar.
Good morning. You won't believe it, but I'm going to announce the results of the program again because twice wasn't enough. I was invited to give you a summary of the program results, but let me start with a confession. I am an activist, a climate activist, meaning that I am more or less against some of the people here present, but I will not do that because I will not criticize anyone because then I won't get paid. So I'm going to praise a project developed by the General Secretary for the Environment, which is not common in my line of work, but fortunately not so rare. In our latest conference, Portugal is in the forefront of climate policies. It's in the forefront of the environmental laws. It's in the forefront or ahead of Europe, and Europe is ahead of the world. But unfortunately, we all know that the world is not in a hurry, so being leaders won't be enough. We have to be even more ambitious, and because winning this race without the competition is not sufficient. Having said this, let me announce the results. The results are extremely positive, but I have to mention some negative aspects as well. But the pointer doesn't seem to be working, so can you move on with the presentation, please? Anyway, we don't need the presentation on the screens for me to continue. So the environment program, or climate change and low carbon economy, was a platform for innovation and experimentation. I mean, we didn't save the world, but we discovered many ways to improve things by using some technologies, some of them new, others not so much, and understanding how we can improve the impact of certain actions in three main areas: circular economy, biosphere reserves, and climate mitigation and adaptation. I know you have not seen yet the results in writing, so which area do you think was the most difficult to achieve the objectives? You can speak. Which one do you think was the most difficult? It's always the same, isn't it? Precisely, mitigation and adaptation to climate change. It was the most urgent, the one that we have more panic about, and yet the most difficult to attain, always given the scale of actions required. Now, when I look at the objectives of this program to ensure a good environmental status, fight climate change, reduce economic and social disparities, and strengthen the relationships with donor countries, because we need more money to keep doing things well, Madam Ambassador. I must think that what we do is ask our companions, our friends from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway to help us do things that they have been doing well for some time. But we also invested Portuguese money to help the environment, but with much more bureaucracy than the Secret Center for this Christmas. And bureaucracy was one of the weaknesses in this program, but I'll come to that later. So we are good students. We'll need some more pilot tests to get even better. So we need more funding. We already have. Now we have to decide what to do about it. And because the floor likes metrics, let's go for it. We had 161 applications received, 125 were approved. 60 projects were supported throughout the country. nationwide, because sustainability does not just consider Lisbon, although 40% of the investment stayed in Lisbon, but we'll come to that. In total, 28.9 million euros were invested, 85% of our international partners, and 15% with participation of the Portuguese state. The financial execution was of 87%, an amount which is quite high, a value which is quite high because of COVID-19 pandemic. We were stranded for some time. Lisbon was the European green capital, if you remember, but we could develop no actions. It was very difficult. So here you have the main results, but there are more. These are the main ones in the area of circular economy. The projects were not only about the 3 R's we are used to, but how we can imagine processes to reduce the need to reuse and recycle. The targets, all these targets, as you can see, were overcome. The target reducing 60% the construction demolition waste was overcome. 70% of projects, the use of secondary materials overcame in over 40%. Jobs created, 31 jobs in this area alone, and the perspective was to create 25 innovative solutions. Well, that was amazing, fascinating. Who says the Portuguese are not innovative does not know the Portuguese. We are very great at innovating, aren't we? Awareness campaigns, 513 and over or 510 more than planned. Is this good? It can be bad too. Well, it's good because we need communication, we need awareness, because this is a change that will be difficult and it will require most people to be on board, namely when we have to take political measures that will not be very popular. On the other hand, we spent a lot of time with these awareness campaigns, but we might have invested in something more disruptive of the processes. And yet, in Portugal, if you don't know, the rate of garbage separation is low vis-à-vis the rest of Europe, so awareness is really important. And as far as buildings are concerned, 6 pilots were built, so 6 instead of 3, twice as much. So excellent results. But I promised I would say some negative things. So this was the only target that was not achieved. Plastic, recycled plastic. As you can see, we did not meet this target by far. I was thinking, why didn't we meet this target? Well, maybe if someone wants to say something about this, please just raise your hand. But why do I think it wasn't attained? Because infrastructures are insufficient and the coverage of the territory is reduced. These new plastic recycling projects did not achieve so many territories and population as it would have been necessary to achieve that, to attain that goal. There was lack of awareness despite those 513 campaigns, meaning that the Portuguese need a new Gervasio or something of the kind, because we learned in the 1990s was lost along the way, and given the complexity of the waste. Unfortunately, plastics are very different. Not all of them are recyclable. The technologies to recycle them are very expensive and we don't have access to those. So the complexity of this waste is to take into account for new projects in the next funding cycle. What can we do in the future to mitigate these issues? To enlarge, extend the deposit system, expand the deposit, to have more creative and comprehensive educational campaigns to achieve other publics, even those that are not priority. We keep hearing from the government, from the companies, from the civil society that we are always talking about the young people. But let's talk about the elderly as well. It's not the young people that take the garbage out, it's their parents and their grandparents. So even though we have evidences of that the children learn in school and then they teach their parents and grandparents, but now it's about the time that we also speak directly to those people and not exclude them from the awareness campaigns, because they will have the power to make decisions at home. And finally, to finance technologies for complex plastics. This will be the most complicated part. It will require more financial resources, but it will help managing the complexity of waste. It is also possible to try to come up with projects that still at the origin lowering the complexity of the waste, helping the companies that produce these packagings to produce simpler packages and with more recyclable materials. Now, as far as the biosphere reserves are concerned, it was a huge success, as you've seen. If you haven't seen the portal of biosphere reserves yet, take a look at it. It will be a way to visit Portugal via internet. Very nice, very pretty, and it is full of resources about not just the ecosystem services in those territories, but a lot of cultural information about the regions. So it's a fascinating platform that I did have the pleasure to present when the project was over. Another forum. Now, 12 reserves benefited, and in those 12 we held sustainable development plans. And this is also about the management of those territories, not just the portal, but the management, the actual management of those territories, that have in mind sustainable development objectives. As far as training is concerned, we wanted to train 24 professionals, and we ended up training 300. So this is very positive. We have to continue developing projects in this area, and yet you know what comes next. The beneficiaries in terms of people were behind the target. Not such an important difference, but why did this happen? What were the reasons? First, geographical limitations, because if you look at the infographics that I will show in a while, the distribution of projects across the country, some territories didn't have projects at all. And if they had one or two projects in these areas, that might have easily been offset this difference. Maybe one or two projects would be enough to offset this difference. When I talk about 40% of the funding saying in Lisbon, meaning that the target audience is the same in many projects, so the reached people are less. Difficulties of access in implementation. It has to do with the bureaucratic issues that I will criticize further ahead. It makes it that the people in these territories that were not used could not make a strong application to get funded and have their applications approved, not because the idea didn't have quality, but because of difficulties in access and execution that require more support and information or training. So we have to check this up. We made a survey with the candidates to see how they applied, and it would be good that in the next process there will be more support provided to those that want to apply, and also a lack of community integration. It's not significant, it depends from project to project, but in some of them there were not sufficient involvement. And when I talk about lack of community integration, I mean involving the community in the design of the project, not its execution. These are different things. We focus a lot in the implementation, but we involve the communities in the design stage. The probability that afterwards, to continue the project after it has been managed by us, it's much greater, and the beneficiaries will increase with time, not just limit to the time of funding. So we have to strengthen logistics, we have to integrate more the communities in the design and implementation of projects, but as I said, mainly in the design stage. Finally, the third area. Well, I will keep on talking for some time. Mitigation and adaptation to climate change. We aimed at, we wanted to have about 5 million people involved in adaptation strategies and 477,000 in the mitigation measures. As you can see, we overcame the targets in an overwhelming manner, but let me point to a systemic thing, not an environmental issue. Something we see when we talk about climate change globally, stronger focus on mitigation, on adaptation, not mitigation. But without mitigation, the adaptation is useless, because without mitigation, the adaptations we make to the different scenarios that we can foresee today will not be sufficient, because things will continue to get worse. So let me take advantage of this occasion to please don't forget about mitigation. Mitigation, you have to invest in it. Science has told us everything we have to do, what we did wrong, what we have to do differently to come back to the planet acceptable level, so it's just lower emissions. And we have plenty of projects, plenty of work done, plenty of resource investment. Lowering emissions is where things went worst. And we cannot forget, the scientists told us that is the most important thing we can do about this triple planet crisis that the Secretary General spoke about in the beginning. So 17 jobs were created instead of 10. 38 municipalities developed adaptation plans instead of 8. And 4 pilot projects to fight desertification were created instead of 3. So as you can see, the outcomes were extremely positive. But as I was telling you again, we are not so good at lowering the emissions. This is where we failed in this project period. We are not working on mitigation. We are working on several adaptation processes, and that's good. It will be necessary. We know that we have 4 years to make a U-turn of this truck that is running against the wall. So we have 4 years to reverse, and it's not those 390 tons that will help a lot. So we have to be much better. First, to begin with, the mitigation target was much lower than the adaptation. So when they're designing the competition, more adaptation projects were valued. Then there is a lack of scale. These are local projects that are not able to scale up their carbon reduction capacities. Planning was over-optimistic. In reality, we don't have large-scale projects, and we did not consider the indirect impact of projects, because a lot of them, when they are more developed and mature, they will be able to reduce more their emissions, meaning that this number can increase with time. Now, what can we do? Prioritize initiatives that have a direct impact on emissions and adjust the objectives based on local capacities in the context of the projects, because we were overly optimistic. Regarding the SDGs, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15 were the ones that were at the core of this project. Sustainable communities, sustainable consumption, climate action, protecting the marine life and protecting the land life. So it's well divided. Well, one of them got much more funding than the others in marine life, and climate change had more projects. I must say that the focus on sustainable production and consumption, without talking about new economic systems, new ways of doing economy, of sharing, lending, reducing, and an ugly word, degrowth, I know you don't like the word, will always be insufficient when the main objective is to lower emissions. So maybe we should talk more about this SDG of sustainable production and consumption, along with the economic growth SDG, which also focuses on a planet with finite resources. Good examples. Now, a while ago, most of them were presented, but we have 3 of them here. Deposits for non-reusable packaging. This example comes from the Azores, but it was also used in the mainland. The deposit system where the consumers are incentivized to return non-reusable plastic, metal and glass beverage packaging. So it's in the 90s we had these return bottles. Remember that I remember going with my mother to the grocery with a bottle and glass bottle and to return it to the grocery, and I would love it because I would get the money. Now that was lost, and we are trying to bring this back, and it was a great success. The Biosphere Reserve portal, I already talked about it. There is a summary there, but I will can't read it here, but I will give it the slide to you. And the management of the Seura River Basin project that will be applied to other river basins. it included not just rehabilitation of the ecosystem, but the hydraulic infrastructures, because there were some problems in their dams. There is a target of the European Union to free the rivers, to liberate the rivers, to remove all barriers so they can flow better, and so we can have a healthier ecosystem. There is a lot of work to do in this area, and this is a pilot project that we have to take into account and get to know well to apply to other contexts, river basins. At the end of the day, it was a great success. The level of satisfaction of partnerships was 6.8 in a scale of 1 to 7. The level of trust between the beneficiary and donor states and entities was 7/7. The proportion of cooperating organizations applied the knowledge acquired in this partnership is 100%, and 29 projects are being carried out in partnership with the donor countries. So undoubtedly this is a major success, and we shall continue it. Now, what can we do better? Complex processes, there's a lack of motivation, we have to reduce bureaucracy and find support to those that cannot deal with this bureaucracy that we cannot reduce. Geographic concentration of 40% of projects in Lisbon. We have to rebalance this geographic focus, incentivizing projects in other regions, and emission reductions was far below expectations, and we have to do something about it with planning better these projects, and increase or raise the target of the low emissions and then meet it. We have to be very ambitious in this main mitigation measure for climate change. And the last thought of to do what we can do more and better, put the people at the center. Put people in the center, involvement of communities, commitment to gender equality, social inclusion, and support for the groups most affected directly or indirectly by climate change, the involvement of young people in the process of transition to the more sustainable future. I include also the elderly here, and when we talk about involving the youngsters, it's not to convey our responsibility to the younger generations. If I'm waiting for my daughter to come to the government, she'll never come to the government, because there will be no government on the planet. It is up to us now, those that are working, that have this hold these offices to make the transition. But it's important to have time to listen and involve the younger ones, because they have the right to decide about the future. Next round, we will prioritize projects based on the ecosystem services with the local impact good maturity. Good maturity will amplify the scale and the possibility to have even better results. And the main objective is to have an impact on society as a whole, so that it can scale them up in a global perspective. The fight against climate change will be at the center of the impact analysis. This is what I read, and I was promised to, and I will be here next year to make sure you have fulfilled this promise. How are we in terms of mitigation? So everything in line with the National Energy and Climate Plan 2030, the Carbon Neutrality Roadmap, and the EU Green Deal. As we know, and I started by that, they are overly ambitious targets. We are leading Europe and the world, but we have to do better than that. Now, online, so it's the countdown. There's infographics where you can see all this information, everything that I did not share with you because it was too much in this website. In 3, 2, 1, let's believe it's online. Just take a look. You can check. Well, thank you for listening to me. I remind you about the mitigation. Do not forget about mitigation. When we focus too much on adaptation, it's like just throwing down the towel, but without mitigation we won't get there. And I also like to stress that this program is not just about results, it's about projects, and how these projects have involved a lot of people that are worked towards a fairer and greener future. It's about creating this future where all these political decision makers to citizens have an important role to play. This program is showing that we can unite different countries in a common cause, and it is possible to integrate lessons learned in errors committed to do more and better all the time. So please think about your role in this project in the coming years. Thank you again, and I'm ready for the next stage. I hope you too.
Obrigada, Joana. Obrigada pelos desafios.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you for these challenges. It was an excellent paper. Now, I remind you that in our website, the environmental program, you have the infographics showing the results of the program and resuming what we consider to be more important. Now it's time to have a coffee break. We'll be back in 15 minutes. So, and then now you can go to the other side with the part of this room for the coffee break. Thank you.
Retomamos a nossa...
So let's resume our session on the inclusion of the environment program within the framework of the EEA grants, led in Portugal by the General Secretariat for the Environment. Now we'll have a panel of guests discussing the topic, the other side of the program, what perspectives? It will bring together different perspectives on public environmental policies, how to design new environmental programs, how do we look at the path taken by environmental policies and devise new ways forward, how do we coordinate responses and support. We would like to invite to come to the center of the room first the guest moderator, Filipe Luís, a journalist from Visão's magazine. Please take your seat here on the right hand side. I would like to invite also Ana Salgueiro from Consulting for Sustainability Company. Magnar Odlian, partner of the Innovation Norway program. Nuno Lacasta, representing the ADA PT program. Representing the DG for Maritime Policy, Marisa Ruth Assis. And representing the association Zero, Sustainable Earth System Association, Francisco Ferreira. So I'll give the floor immediately to the guest moderator, Filipe Luís. Let's check if your microphone is working. Thank you and welcome. I have with me a distinguished panel of speakers to discuss this topic, the environment at large, and what it is at stake. This is a key topic. Before moving on to the topic of our discussion, I would like to ask you a general question related to the current news. I would like to start by Francisco Ferreira. He needs no introduction. So the general question is related to the COP29 that took place recently. In your opinion, was this a COP29 or a FLOP29? Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank the invitation and greet the members of this panel and the participants. There are always pros and cons at these conferences. And that was also the case on the conference on biodiversity in Cali, the COP in Baku, and the conference that is taking place now. These are the so-called Rio conference that were established in 1992 on the Summit on Environment and Sustainability back in 1992. Regarding climate, one of the key aspects was related to the financing, and various independent stakeholders estimate that the financing needs sit at $1 billion USD. The original agreement provided for 250 B USD, then 300 B USD of public financing from developed countries by 2035. And of course that we were not happy, taking into account the financing needs. Of course, it's better to have an agreement with this amount, and let's see if these commitments materialize, because there's a plenty of uncertainty regarding the US. Well, the previous commitment didn't materialize, right? The 100 trillion was only achieved in 2022. So the issue is there will be some financing available, but it will fall short of the needs. So you may say that the conference was a flop. Well, but some important decisions were taken in other areas, including the indicators to be established next year in Brazil. Some countries submitted their targets, so there has been some progress. But on this topic of financing, which is a key topic, I think that we were disappointed. The commitments are below the expectations, and apparently the developed countries didn't assume the historical responsibility. Portugal contributes with 9 million euros per year, which is too little. But regarding the debt, climate debt agreements that were signed with Cape Verde and that will be signed with São Tomé and Príncipe very soon, these are examples that can be followed by other countries. But all this conference leaves us always a bit bittersweet. Someone else would like to make a comment on the COP29 outcome? No, if that is not the case, let's move on to the topic of our panel. I will start by Ana Salgueiro, external consultant of the program on adaptation and mitigation of climate changes. You have worked together with the program. You carried out inspection activities on the ground. What is your perspective regarding the environmental program, comparing the initial expectations with the final outcomes? What is your opinion? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to take part in this panel. And I would like to share with you my thoughts on this significant endeavor. Answering your question, well, initially I was not aware of the scope and the size of this program, but I would say that it was very rewarding. It was indeed a privilege to be able to and work along these 60 projects across the country and to meet these highly committed and engaged teams. The projects were indeed very rewarding, and they bring a significant additional value. The in loco inspection is almost like an audit. I don't like to call it an audit. I work rather as a consultant, but the inspections aim to control the physical outcomes of the projects, to see if they met the aims set up in the applications, and I also took charge of the control of the financial part and the project file. This was the most challenging part. The project file, which includes all the documents related to the programs. It was the most difficult part. Those that were with me on the ground really understand what I mean, because we had a template and the projects had to meet all the requirements provided for in the template, and they had to submit all the relevant information to make it available to all the stakeholders. The projects are indeed highly innovative. I was able to witness this in loco. These are very creative projects indeed. It's important to highlight that the projects do have an impact on the local ground. I was able to witness the challenges, the limitations on the ground, which is something that usually you are not able to put into words in the written reports. So it was very important to go to the ground and talk to the people and to the teams and to get a better understanding of the territories and how the applications were submitted and how difficult it is to implement them then, including the different circumstances on the territory. But I would like to ask you if there were any significant changes to the programs in view of the specific circumstances on the ground. Yes, but that's positive. These are living projects, I would say. They are innovative projects, so it's only natural that there are some changes from the time of the application, submission of the application, to the time of the implementation of the project. So changes were required, and it was important again for me to be on the ground working with the teams. I read the reports, of course, but then when I was on the spot, I had a totally different perception and knowledge, and then I could convey this to the management team of the environment program, explain them why those changes were made. So apparently there was an original script and then some annotations and changes must be made. Yes, within certain limits, because there was some outcomes that should have been achieved. But flexibility was a key word, because we had to understand the specific circumstances on the ground, and we had to have flexibility to make the necessary adaptations. So I think, for me, it was very rewarding to work with the 60 projects scattered across Portugal in different areas. And I think that each project was able to learn from each other. 1 + 1 is always more than 2, I would say. I was not there like a formal auditor. As I said, I was rather as an advisor, helping them to overcome the challenges in view of achieving the expected outcomes. Sometimes I would give them some hints and suggestions, telling them, well, I learned this in another project, maybe you can incorporate it here, and this would be beneficial for you. This will be the first round of questions, of course, and then there will be a second round. Now I would like to move to Magnar Odelin. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. He's a partner, program partner. He's representing Innovation Norway, and he monitored the implementation of this program since the design, the selection of the project, developing of the content, assessment of the programs, and he worked in partnership with the Environment Program, carrying out many visits to different projects. My first question to you is the following. Being a key partner, are you happy with the final outcome? I mean, the final outcome met your original expectations?
Thank you. First of all, I'm sorry that I'm the only one in the panel not able to address you in Portuguese. I'm sorry for that, but I have to speak English. I can deal with the Portuguese wines and the cakes and everything, but I struggle with the language.
I think that there's no problem with that.
But then as regards...
we all are comfortable with
exactly. As regards the results, perhaps you wonder why Innovation Agency in Norway is the program partner in the environment program and not then the environment authorities. That is, of course, the because the approach of this environment program is slightly different from the approach of most other environment programs financed by EEA grants, because it has been a lot of focus on involving private sector, not only the private sector at large, but companies specifically. And that has been a very interesting thing. And I think that we have, as already mentioned in some of the interventions before the coffee break, achieved quite a lot of good results, both from specific projects, but not at least from the bilateral activities. Made a lot of connection between key players in Portugal and Norway. And of course also the results is sometimes a question of timing. We heard before the coffee break from Johanna, a little bit of disappointment as regards some of the results. She mentioned, for instance, plastic, but I think that's kind of an area where we have achieved quite a lot, because the program has contributed to then getting now the legal framework for the deposit system in Portugal. And that will lead to really, really big results in the years to come. So it's a kind of a question of timing. So all in all, I think we have achieved a lot, and we have this good balance between them projects with public entities and also then the contribution of private companies. I think that we have already, before the EU Green Deal, implemented kind of the spirit of the Green Deal in this program. So that's I'm really happy about that.
Muito bem. Diga-me uma coisa, na fase de seleção dos projetos...
During the project selection phase, were you surprised with the projects being submitted?
Well, I think that overall the quality, if not surprising, but the quality was really good in all the schemes. You all know that we had a number of schemes and a number of calls in different areas. But overall, I think the quality was really good. And from then the perspective of Innovation Norway as the innovation agency and mainly dealing with the private companies, we saw a lot of good things in the circular economy area. So I'm not surprised, but I'm really happy to see then the quality we had of the applications. Yes.
Muito obrigado. Continuo a seguir esta ordem da fileira.
Thank you very much. Let me move on now to Nuno Lacasta. He was a chairperson of the Portuguese Environmental Agency. I have here some notes about you, about your bio. You also followed up this program. You promoted 3 projects, including the regulation of the position and return of packages. Maybe you are responsible for that very annoying measure, but which is very useful. I mean that now we have the caps of the plastic bottles fixed to it. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's very annoying for the user, but it's very beneficial for the environment. You are a top-notch expert on environmental matters in Portugal. As chairperson of the Portuguese Environmental Agency, Nuno, do you think that the environment program was sufficiently ambitious in terms of targets? And secondly, while these programs are very specific, do you think that they can have an impact on a larger scale? Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invitation. I'm not wearing the hat of any public servant currently. I'm a strong advocate of the EEA grants mechanism and also of the environmental program. Let's go back to 2010. I remind a call that I received back then. Back then, I was working on the Climate Change Commission. I received a call from Humberto Rosa, the Secretary of State of Environment, and he told me, we have inherited a program, EEA grants, which historically is focused on housing, and it was a very important program in the Azores. And now we are required to set up several projects, and I want you to develop a project in the climate area. We did some brainstorming sessions and decided to invest on adaptation to climate changes. In 2010, Portugal has just adopted the first national strategy for adaptation. Many of us thought back then that EEA grants, it's like yet another European fund with plenty of red tape, and there will be too many intermediaries between the donors and the beneficiaries. But immediately we realized that the program was designed to foster bilateral relations, to foster the exchange of information, knowledge between different sectors, and without red tape. And this, for me, is the key advantage of the program. Of course, there is always red tape, more on the Portuguese side than on the Norwegian side. There's always red tape involved. But it's also a fact that this program, focused on the strengthening of bilateral relations, is very useful. Let me give you two examples. Our bilateral partner back then was the Civil Protection Authority of Norway. And we were a bit surprised. So we have this authority in Norway that responds to natural disasters, and now they want to play a role on adaptation to climate change. So we were a bit surprised, but it was a learning process from us. The Carl, a Norwegian colleague, which was the focal point back then, he really liked the project, and we really liked him, that he moved to Portugal and he started living in Portugal. So this type of bilateral relations is key for the success of the program. And the second example, which is even more relevant in my opinion, as we have seen in the indicators and metrics, for instance, the ADAPT program, which was a subcomponent and the environmental program, was essential. It was a program developed by you. I mean, it was one of the programs that we developed. It had an envelope of 3 million euros back then. But let me continue. This program was essential to put the things rolling. As I told you, we had just approved back then the National Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change, and now we had to translate the document into actions from the central to the local level. And the ADAPT program financed, developed methodologies for the design of local adaptation strategies that didn't exist back then. Of course, eventually Portugal would be able to do it. But the fact that Norway understood that it would be important to encourage the development of these local adaptation plans at the municipal level was key. 30 municipalities developed these strategies. The numbers are correct, but initially we had 50 or 60 municipalities, and so currently we have hundreds of municipalities with these specific strategies. And there's yet another metric which was not properly valued. We were able to create an entire generation of technicians at the local level that didn't exist. Thanks to the ADAPT program, we developed the capacity building of these technicians. These technicians indeed played a key role at the local level by integrating the adaptation plans with the master plans and the urban development plans at the local level. In these specific programs, Nuno, I infer from your words that the upgrade boosted by Norway is not limited to the financial aspects. because they also shared plenty of know-how with you. Is that correct, my understanding? I mean, yes, the know-how, the engagement capacity, there's cross-fertilization. We have learned a lot from our Norwegian colleagues, but we also learned a lot from the Italian colleagues. You've mentioned the project in the Ceira River Basin. In this specific project, this was a second-generation project focused on adaptation to climate changes. We were able to restore 50% of an area which had been impacted by natural disasters, and we were able to create a project on the ground, and we did the adaptation in situ, cleaning water streams, rebuilding bypasses of the river waters in order to slow down the river discharges, the monitoring of the impact of the climate changes in situ, the engagement with the local communities. And as I was saying, we learn from similar projects in Italy, in Bulgaria, if I'm not wrong. But we also shared our experience and best practices with many other projects. I'm a strong advocate of EEA grants and similar initiatives. Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing with us those examples, those concrete examples that shed a light on the impact of the programs. Now let me move on to Ruth Assis Pires, the Director of the Programs and Financing Services at DG Maritime Policy. She's responsible for the management and oversight of the Blue Growth Program within the EEA grants framework, and she's also responsible for implementation of flagship initiatives related to blue economy. And it's great to discuss blue economy, green economy, so that the public at large knows that the environmental policy doesn't clash with economic policy. Environmental policy generates economic growth opportunities if properly managed. My first question to you is the following. Do you think that these synergies were fruitful? Were fruitful and useful for your Blue program?
Obrigada primeiro pelo convite,
Good morning to you all. Thank you for having invited me. I'm a program operator of Crescimento Azul Blue Growth under the management for ocean policy, and our connection to the environment program and Blue Growth has been very fruitful, given the synergies that we have between the two programs. As a matter of fact, we did not have no application open to two programs, allowing for an applicant to apply to, well, simultaneously to two programs. But that might be, in the future, a good opportunity. Now, in Blue Growth, we always have projects that also involve the green. So there is a complementarity among all areas, not just with the environment, but with gender equality, active citizens. In all programs, Blue Growth has always a synergy and encompasses all these subjects. So I believe that this synergy is critical. As far as projects are concerned, we have plenty of projects in recycling and circular economy that also met the environmental goals. So it's always useful, and it is always inspiring to see how developers, when they face any difficulties, how they can solve them and how resilient they are. It's important to acknowledge their work because they have this merit. They are the ones that have this dream and that go after it and never quit. Even though, like in times of the pandemic, this was probably the most demanding mechanism, and with all these constraints, they were nevertheless able to follow their dreams. Hence, I think we should acknowledge them.
Eu não sei se faz sentido neste âmbito, mas estou muito curioso.
I'm not sure this is important here, but I have some curiosity. We have one of the largest exclusive economic zone, and the salty water, as the poet Pessoa said, never ends. Can you give us a few examples about what is it about, this blue growth, crescimento azul? Well, it is mainly inserted in, it is mainly about research, literacy on the ocean and business. So it has all to do with projects that are sustainable in their broader forms, and that can be they can be innovative and at the same time focusing on a sustainability, whatever it is. I mean, the ships that navigate in the Tagers and that have an electrical component, or projects in terms of circularization of materials, the collection of marine waste, and the cleaning of the oceans. All these examples are about that. Magna, would you like to say something about this?
Yes, because Innovation Norway is also the partner in the
Yes.
Blue Growth program. So that's why we have seen then this cooperation between the programs. Very interesting approach. We use the word synergies. Some of you know that I'm not a big fan of the word synergies, because sometimes it's what we in Norwegian call an empty barrel making a lot of noise. But still, I like more to talk about complementarity and cooperation and so on. And we have seen that in the programs. And I think then the approach in Portugal has been a little bit different, because a closer cooperation between the programs. Of course, when we develop the programs, we set some common outputs and indicators and so on. That's good. But still, I think if you look at the results, of course, if you look at the results, you can always find something and label it as synergies. But sometimes it's kind of collateral damage from projects developed in different programs. But in this case, we saw areas that they were kind of during the program development, it was decided that, okay, we will have this kind of focus in the business program, we will have this kind of focus within the same kind of area topic in the environment program. So when we look at that, we can really see that we have achieved something cross program results. And that's also, I have to say, there's a little bit, not a little bit, I much to thank the National Focal Point for that, because the National Focal Point in Portugal, they are much more hands-on than the national focal points in most other countries. I'm looking at Maria, so I'm always saying, and I have to say it in this setting as well, that the National Focal Point in Portugal is our favorite national focal point. And we are working with 10 of them. So that has been a really good cooperation between the programs, the National Focal Point, and also the Embassy of Norway. They have been more involved than most Norwegian embassies in the EEA grants. So there's been a very good group of people working together. So that has achieved results than cross-program.
Muito bem, muito obrigado, Magnar. Eu gostaria de, relativamente aos recursos do mar...
As regards the resources of the sea, I would like to say something. It's something I am curious about how to make the most of resources. Some 2 or 3 years ago, I heard about
a group of young Portuguese scientists that were developing a project to make the most of marine weeds. I think it was the red algae. We have plenty of those in the Portuguese Ocean, the red algae, that could replace bovine feed and hence reduce drastically the emission of gases by those cows. And this was being developed in Vietnam, or the idea came from Vietnam. I mean, is this something you know about? No, unfortunately I don't. But I heard about this and I was curious, but then I never heard about it again. But I was told that that would replace animal feed and would prevent the cows from farting, from polluting the environment as they do. So marine resources is something that we can take advantage of. Francisco, the Zero Association, do you think it is relevant, the membership of NGOs like of your organization and others alike to the environment program, and the results, the objective results that have been attained in the projects in which you participated? What can you tell us about that? Well, it is, or it was, a great challenge to Zero. First and foremost, the project that we were involved with had a very strong practical component. And that had to do with a key subject, which was the collection of waste, and in this case in the municipality of Sintra, in two areas of the municipality of Sintra, in the town and in a more suburban part. And it is directly related to what should be the future of our policies, because we pay for electricity depending on how much electricity we spend. We pay for the water depending on the water we use, but we don't pay for the waste depending on the amount of waste that we produce, namely undifferentiated waste that not easy to get rid of, like bio-waste or selective materials that can be recycled. So there was a challenge here. At the same time, to bring together an association like Zero with companies, because the consortium of the project involved several companies. And that was an experience, a relevant experience to us. Secondly, it involved people. Of course, it's normal it involves people, but the direct contact with populations, as far as waste is concerned, makes it much more difficult with the dimension of environmental education and learning what practices are to be carried out within the framework of the project, a whole collaboration and availability, so that the system might work and be tested. And then there was a technological component, and the technological component wasn't easy, because it entailed or meant that people had containers that people open according to the barcode they have, each one has, and then they had to identify the types of. So this was quite complicated, and these IDs. So the project here is being developed, and it was mentioned before. At a time when we were in lockdown, and then there was a post-pandemic. There were no means to provide equipment and to meet our needs, so difficulties were huge. But I'd say that the fact that today we have systems like the one that we tested thanks to this project already in other parts of Portugal working, that is probably the best proof that it was worth it to get involved in this project. I mean, it was worth it to it was, and to the companies that participated, and also the learning. What we learn, how we account for the carbon. In Trato Liscio, we were characterizing detailed, rigorous characterization of all types of waste, urban waste that came to that area. So to make the state of play and then a comparison. And so I think that this was a challenge, where Zero at first was a bit reluctant, given what we might be facing. I confess it was not an easy project. I can laugh now, but the project manager got in pre-retirement, and now and he had a nervous breakdown almost. I mean, he's a great person in terms of involvement and rigor, and following this project, and he told me, I need to rest now. I need to rest. But anyhow, let's hope he won't have to be recycled. Well, anyway, we have to recognize that given all these issues, there was really the municipality did learn, we did learn about the work on the ground, and something that the main difference with what is on paper. I mean, this goes for every project. What's on paper, and then the hands-on approach, and the difference was huge. And of course, we would love it to do what was written, but no, it was much more complicated than that. And well, that's good, because that's what we want from these case studies. No, I'm not sure if this is a flow to go, but I just like to leave here a message that I think it's obvious to me, but maybe not to everyone, even some of you in the room, although most of you were directly or indirectly involved in the program. I'm talking about the environment program. Most projects were not thought or designed in the bottom-up logic, and that was not by accident. It was strategically thought by the Norwegians and by the Portuguese. I mean, I say by the Portuguese because, a while ago I said in the case of the ADAPT program, we, on purpose, from the beginning, had the notion that we wanted to make this a fishing rod so that we could have a multiplier catalyzer effect and to dynamize an activity that we wanted to make happen. This example of the waste management in the program that is now finishing, was also a deliberate decision, because in Europe there were 1 or 2 countries that already had this return and deposit system installed. And they said, let's learn from the best. Well, it happens that one of the 2 best was a Norwegian one, so let's work strategically on this issue. So I absolutely agree that the fact that we rolled out, involving NGOs and stakeholders, the return and deposit system in the country as a pilot, getting monies from the environmental fund to complement this and start things. It was fundamental. Another example, it would not, in other words, Portugal had to develop certainly something that eventually you called roadmap, adaptation roadmap. So we had an adaptation strategy, a program document that we needed to analyze in detail the risks in the different sectors, coastal areas, forest centers, etc., and try to identify the investment values or costs to assess how much it would cost Portugal to respond to this year's challenge. Now, I mean, this is as strategic as it can get. So the fact that we took advantage of this program to launch the National Adaptation Roadmap in 2011, we already had one before. So this was an example, a good example of this strategic nature
we call it a smart character of the program and its initiatives. Well, the return and deposit system, we are talking about bottles, correct? Yes, our environmentalist still remembers that. It sounds like a novelty, but in my days it was like that. I mean, even wine bottles, they would have to be returned in exchange for a deposit. And it's funny. I mean, it's like we go back to old practices that were correct. And this is very interesting. Now, before starting the second round, Francisco, you talked about learnings. We also heard about campaigns and also contradictory, it may seem, lack of literacy. And this also, you also spoke about the detailed analysis of the type of waste. Would you say that people still separate incorrectly and get wrong sometimes in good faith when they separate their home garbage? I think that here we have I mean, I'm not talking about the companies now, just the households. Yeah, I would even start earlier. I still know about a lot of people that do not separate at all. This is something that we shouldn't have. And on the other hand, there are also yes, there are people that have trouble separating the garbage. But the most important aspect is that the issue of the waste is probably one of the most complicated tasks and challenges in terms of how people respond. And this is a direct project. It's very easy for us to have a meter at home to see how much water am I spending, am I using. Well, we already even have smart electricity meters, but as far as waste is concerned, and given the wide variety of waste, it's not so easy to account for that. So literacy is still most important question, but the price as well, that I should pay for the waste I am producing, that is the way to go. By the government, really. How can we go about that? And then the role of the local authorities, which is decisive in this implementation. So if there is a complicated subject in which we developed this project, it was precisely the subject of waste. That among the various types of waste, climate, blue growth, etc., this was one of the most challenging ones. And literacy wasn't enough. Yes, of course, literacy is necessary, but much more than that. And that's why, and we have to understand the challenge when we talk to the people and we work with them. So here you have a bag where you have to put this type of bio waste here, the other types of waste there, and this is a system that has been implemented in advance. We didn't get there and said, well, let's start from start. No, we just added an extra layer to what was already the waste management in Sintra. Now we have with us the Secretary of State for the Environment, Mr. Sousa. Welcome to our panel. Francisco. Now I'm afraid I'm monopolizing the conversation. Yes, I just wanted to announce the arrival of the Secretary of State, but now, and before going to a second round of questions, the municipality of Sintra, and I'm curious about this. The municipality of Sintra has everything: the beach, countryside, the historic center, and the suburban area. Very much populated. Well, IC19 is the highway with most traffic in Europe. So in a municipality like Sintra, this means that we have different solutions for different parts of the municipality. Well, we didn't go to the beach. You didn't have the time. Yes, we started in. We stayed in town with totally different characteristics. And then the suburban area. So we did work on the suburban area and on an historic zone with different types of inhabitants, population, different types of occupation of buildings that represented these differentiation. Of course, we could have even additional types of occupation, more rural areas, but well, this was enough to have these two components. Now, in this second round of questions, let's turn to Ana Salgueiro and look ahead. I believe we deemed the impact of the program was very positive, but do you have any idea how this will continue? What can we do to make things even better and to correct some positive aspects? Yes, we can always improve with time. I think it's fundamental this program is fundamental. This funding, these projects, to allow for their replication, scalability, and maybe more in certain cases than in others, but the gratifying feeling of seeing the projects making a difference, being useful. But then there is the opposite sensation or feeling that this is just a drop in the ocean. So this funding, more funding is necessary, namely in projects. I'm not saying that we should leave behind certain projects, but maybe investing not so much in certain programs like fighting desertification on recovering river basins. They are huge areas. Measures that are very specific and so relevant. So I wanted to stress the relevance of continuing this funding to useful projects in these areas. I'd also like to stress, and I've said it before, the importance of sharing knowledge between projects in the same call or even in different calls. There was a promotion of several initiatives in this realm. A recent one that gathered the approaches of living laboratories for decarbonization, not just funding by this program but by environmental fund. And so there was, because the project developers were there, and so we can get a lot from this sharing, from these initiatives. So I would also say that the communication advertising or publicity is very important. I speak for myself. I now know much more. I'm much more aware. I think there should be a continuity in this publicity and communication, just like it was said before, but maybe in a different way, because there are issues, a lot of noise, too many initiatives about too many different actions, and communication, these type of financing projects and results must be done. I wouldn't say in a smart way, but creative. Let's call it creative, different way. So these three notes are very important to me, and also the verification. It's very relevant, verification. I've said it before. So in addition to have learned and feeling gratification, it's very important to have someone on field, someone else than the one that is assessing the development of the project, this person to doing the follow-up and sharing the pain of the developers on the ground. Yes, I'm sure that monetization is fundamental.
A question to you, Magnar. What would you like to see included in a future environmental program in Portugal?
Yeah, that's a big question, and of course we have to be aware that, as already said, that the funding is limited. So we need to design the program in a very good and even smart way to get the best possible impact of then the projects we will finance. And of course, we have to look at the whole toolbox because we have had already in this program now different areas, and of course short-term mitigation is important, yes, but more long-term or maybe mid-term development of smart solutions, that be technology or processes or whatever, is of course also very important. And we will also have to look at the longer perspective, and that will be then more long-term research and development. I think we need to combine it, but given then the limited amount of funding that for sure we will have available, we will have to design then the programs in a smart way, because we have to remember, compared to some other schemes, I assume both national schemes in Portugal and not at least EU funding, we are talking about small money, but we have some advantages, and that is then the focus on cooperation, and also, as already mentioned, a little bit less red tape. The tape is perhaps only pink, not red, so it's then a little bit more easy for then project promoters to be involved in projects, and then we should make sure that we will keep that advantage to then be able to compare them to the funding you have available to get them the good impact. And I think we have had good impact, and I think we will have some lessons learned that we will be able to design then a future program in an even better way.
E diga-me uma coisa, como é que o programa português compara?
How do you compare the Portuguese program with programs in other European countries? How do you compare it?
Yeah, as I already a little bit mentioned, I think then the approach in Portugal is very interesting, with the cooperation between programs and the strong involvement of the national focal point and so on. I think we can see more silos in some of the other countries implementing programs, and perhaps even a little bit more bureaucracy in some countries, because they have national cultures, national rules and approaches as regards the rules. But that is also something we should try to work on to simplify procedures and to make life more easy. Project promoters that have been involved in projects, that they know that the reporting is cumbersome and it's a lot of work and so on. And it needs to be, because we need to make sure that we will spend then the money as in a good way, and then the projects will spend the money as they are supposed to do. But still, it's a kind of a balance between then the control and then to make life more easy for project promoters, that we could achieve even more if we find that right balance.
Fica também esse apelo para vermos a questão da burocracia, não é?
Okay, so a call to reduce a bit the red tape. No. Regarding climate change, do you think that the environmental program was consistent and ambitious when it comes to the adaptation to climate changes policy? And do you think that the impact of this program, it will be important to boost adaptation to climate changes in Portugal? Well, I think that to a certain extent I already answered to that question. Now looking forward, I fully agree with what Magnat said. We need to make life easier. Maybe it would be useful to have a test bed, so to say, on how to reduce the red tape.
Para excepcionar regras burocráticas que já são em si mesmo kafkianas.
Quite often we have to deal with rules that are like Kafka-style rules, and sometimes these programs try to address these specific issues of red tape, and that for me is wrong, because I mean it's difficult to go against the existing red tape, because it's not just about reporting, it's about dealing with the red tape and not moving forward to the implementation. So maybe we'd like to ask you to be more innovative
and creative in developing opportunities to know how to reduce the red tape across the board. Anyway, secondly, I do understand the importance of giving visibility to the projects. Again, the project in the Ceira River Basin was key. But there are other projects that are visible even though the funds allocated were lower. I think that we should align this program with the overall priorities of Portugal. And we know that the financing is limited. I mean, there are other funds, European funds, that allocate millions and millions. So we need to be very smart in using the funds under the EEA grants so that they can work as a lever. Let me be honest, these funds within the EEA grants should contribute to catalyze other projects, other financing in a very innovative manner. For instance, on innovative side, as we know, on the blue sea economy, Norway has a long tradition on LE offshore, on wind offshore. And an offshore wind park offsets those amounts of CO2 emissions. Let's be creative and innovative, for instance, on offshore wind production. And also regarding the underwater forests, they are collapsing. They should be used to capture carbon. Everyone has been claiming for a pan-European project on the protection of the underwater forests. And finally, not on a commercial perspective, but on an innovative project, I think that Portugal is at a crossroads, like many other countries. I'm referring to electric mobility. We have the MobiE program, a public network, which in the meantime was open to private operators, but Norway and is the first country in the world in terms of penetration of electric cars. To what extent we can learn from the Norwegian experience regarding the management and deployment of electric vehicles so that we can increase the penetration of electric vehicles. I think that we are at a crossroads here and we need to speed up, so to say. There's just examples of things that could be considered in the future. Before giving the floor to Ruth, I think Magnar wants to make a comment and react to this.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment on offshore wind, because we very much agree that we should use the grant in a strategic way to create something. And offshore wind is a very, very good example of that, because we have used EEA grants, not only then based on the ordinary projects, but the bilateral fund mentioned by Maria in her intervention is very, very important. And actually, there is now a interesting discussion going on between Portugal and Norway on offshore wind, and it's actually started under the EEA grants program. So we use the EEA grants to facilitate then a very important discussion and possible cooperation between Norway and Portugal. And that is the way we should use, especially the bilateral funds, because they are so flexible. So we can do not whatever we want, but we could take then the initiatives and use it as a platform for further cooperation.
Muito obrigado. Ruth Assis Pires.
Thank you very much. Ruth, in the next cycle of this financing mechanism, how do you think we can improve the implementation of the policies that maximize the synergies between the environment and the sea. Well, regarding the next steps, we don't have any concrete information. But as I said earlier, I think that we should make the most of these synergies between the sea and the environment. For instance, we could have maybe a program that would cover both dimensions, the blue growth and the environment. Maybe that could be beneficial. But the negotiations will start soon, and then we'll see how things will pan out. Of course, that we should be able to measure the impact of these synergies. We need to be able to measure the results achieved on the blue growth side and on the environmental side. But it's difficult to carry out these measurements, as far as I know. Then another important aspect that is key is the sharing of knowledge between both programs. This is an advantage. It has been an advantage and it should continue down the road. Then, regarding specific projects, I mean, quite often the projects overlap. Although their focus is distinct. But when we have a very tangible and concrete synergy, when two programs merge to support a single project, the results are more significant, I would say. So the final question to you, Francisco Ferreira. Do you think that these financing programs meet the needs of your association and the NGOs on the environmental side? What can be improved in the future? Well,
ter sido dado uma maior percentagem de comparticipação no caso das organizações não governamentais é uma vantagem.
We are happy to see the support given to the environmental NGOs.
Esperamos que continue a ter.
And I hope that environmental NGOs will continue to benefit from this support in the next program.
Outro tipo de projetos em que nós habitualmente estamos envolvidos, e por exemplo no caso da Zero,
in the case of the Zero Association, the prevailing source of financing is from the European Commission through the LIFE program or
também de fundações,
through foundations.
Não abarca o desafio da conjugação de projetos, como digo, com universidades, no nosso caso, universidades, municípios, empresas.
Doesn't provide for the cooperation between our NGOs, universities and businesses. Whereas in this program, that is a reality. And we are able to learn from each other, from this vast and positive diversity of partners. So it's not only about securing financing, but it's also about enabling the engagement with different partners from different areas.
Ideias ou as áreas em causa serem gratificantes do ponto de vista de todos esses parceiros.
And of course that all partners should see an added value in their participation in these projects.
Há prioridades para o país, há prioridades.
Of course that there are national priorities.
Também quer fazer parte das soluções.
The civil society wants to play a role in achieving the national goals, and we should be smart and wise in the design of the projects, in the setting up of the goals for the next cycle. So in this area we will not be successful without the participation of the civil society. Very soon there will be an European Council on Environment. Do you think that the agenda on the table is ambitious enough? Well, I would say that the problem doesn't lie in Portugal currently. The problem is that there has been a significant change at the political level in the EU, both at the Parliament and at the European Commission. We are now embarking on a new political cycle which will be challenging.
Aquilo que foi a maior revolução do ponto de vista da sustentabilidade, que foi o Pacto Ecológico Europeu.
The Green Deal, which was a watershed moment, and it was a landmark moment for the last European Commission. I do hope that the next European Commission will move forward with the Green Deal. And I do hope that we don't see any U-turns, because now this new Commission must translate the document into concrete actions. But we are already seeing many obstacles emerging, including the long-term financing, the composition of the Parliament, and many obstacles. But it's important to ensure that environment continues to be a key priority. And we fear that due to the near-term concerns on the economic side, we will lose sight of the ultimate goal, which is to address the environmental challenges. Portugal, I must say, has been at the forefront with the right ambition. In some cases, I also think that we need to walk the talk a bit more. And this is something that we want to reflect also at the European level. We hope that Portugal can be one of the strong advocates of the Green Deal, because we have an European Commission and the European Parliament increasingly reluctant in moving forward with these matters on the environmental and climate side. Thank you all. I learned a lot from all of you, and I'm always at your disposal to talk to you. We should meet more often. Thank you. Thank you for your participation and your input. Today we mark the end of the environment program. We will now present you a video that showcases the journey so far, its actors, the teams and all people that lived the realization of these projects, from the planning phase to their implementation on the ground. After all, it's all about the people and their capacity to work together that make the difference. Let's watch the video.
Qual foi o resultado do projeto Smile patrocinado pelo EEA Grandes? O que é que me pode falar sobre isso? A qualidade de vida nas ruas, a higiene, pronto, isto de abrir este espaço, que estava fechado, velho, bicicletas, que são as primeiras no conceito de Sintra a existir, uma horta feita também que não existia, uma horta linda, foi feito os painéis solares na escola. O Smile aqui já comprovou que todo o trabalho que fez aqui foi um trabalho essencial para se desenvolver noutros locais.
Lembra-se do projeto A Esprela Mais Sustentável?
Além dos painéis solares que colocaram aqui no bairro, tem sido um projeto de pioneiro a nível do ambiente da cidade e do país. Acho que isto é uma adiantada que vai, aos poucos e poucos, convencer os moradores a melhorar o seu modo de vida e o ambiente. E eu acho que os moradores do primeiro tiveram dúvidas, mas se aparecer um segundo projeto, estarão muito mais ganhos para outros projetos.
Diga-me então o verdadeiro impacto que causou a nível do ambiente.
As redes tradicionais que usamos levam anos a desaparecerem no fundo do mar. Existe muita arte no fundo do mar perdida, abandonada. É fundamental dar continuidade a este projeto porque será o futuro da pesca, será o futuro de um oceano limpo, de um mar limpo, de um mar sem lixo.
Considera que o projeto E-Redes foi importante para o ambiente?
Sim, sem dúvida. Importante para o ambiente, para sensibilizar os pescadores, para perceberem que o futuro vai passar por aí, sem dúvida alguma. Eu sou da opinião que devemos fazer mais disso, ter mais iniciativas dessas.
Lembra-se do projeto A Forada Living Lab? Fala-me um pouco sobre ele.
Fizemos uma central fotovoltaica com sistemas de armazenamento, portanto fizemos um autoconsumo coletivo que há de derivar para uma comunidade de energias. Houve aqui uma vontade muito grande de que este fosse um bom caso de estudo para que as crianças percebam como é que se produz eletricidade, como é que se produz eletricidade renovável, como é que nós podemos descarbonizar a nossa cidade, a nossa casa, o nosso modelo de vida. O próprio município já avançou com mais 15 centrais fotovoltaicas em escolas. Foi uma espécie de motor que serve para marcar uma tónica de futuro.
E o que é que me pode dizer sobre o REAP?
Foi um projeto que a Universidade de Aveiro teve envolvida, muito focado no tema da sustentabilidade, em que aqui o objetivo seria consciencializar a comunidade da Universidade de Aveiro no intuito da reciclagem de embalagens, neste caso de embalagens de PET e de embalagens de alumínio. Também tivemos contato com um parceiro da Noruega, foi muito positivo perceber já como é que eles fomentam estes sistemas de reembolso no próprio país e penso que Portugal conseguirá tirar partido se conseguirmos seguir as mesmas ideologias e práticas que eles aplicam no país.
Qual foi o impacto do vosso projeto quanto ao ambiente?
Vai haver de certeza impacto do projeto Fishing the Plastic nos próximos 5 anos, não tenho dúvida disso. A introdução do projeto numa comunidade escolar acaba por dar outra dimensão aos conteúdos curriculares, não é, ligados à temática do mar, portanto é muito vantajoso.
Considero que o projeto Bottle to Bottle da Caber foi relevante para a empresa?
Foi muito relevante para a empresa. Permitiu-nos entrar no mercado do RPET, do alimentar, permitiu-nos efetuar investimentos que nós já há algum tempo gostaríamos de fazer e não tínhamos possibilidade e que com a EEA Grant conseguimos fazê-lo.
Um projeto destes não pode deixar de ter um impacto significativo ao nível do território, ao nível do ambiente. Pedia-me que pudesse precisar este impacto, centrando a questão um bocadinho na comunidade, uma vez que abrange cerca de 4 municípios.
Toda esta envolvência, claro que teve um impacto nas diversas componentes, quer ambiental, quer social, quer mesmo depois do ponto de vista do nosso conhecimento institucional na gestão do próprio rio. O rio não é imutável, vai-se transformando, é dinâmico, portanto, e se nós não acompanharmos essa dinâmica, todas essas infraestruturas ficam abandonadas e não cumprem a função.
O que nos podes dizer sobre o projeto Desconstruir para a Economia Circular?
Olha, o projeto Desconstruir para a Economia Circular foi um desafio grande que a comunidade intermunicipal do Baixo Alentejo assumiu, dado o envolvimento de um conjunto alargado de parceiros, e de facto foi um desafio grande tentarmos implementar este projeto no território, que é um território muito grande, mais de 8.500 km², e nos 13 municípios aos quais corresponderam, e parece que a coisa correu bem.
Como o nome do projeto indica, está encaminhado para a economia circular. Nesse sentido, o que nos pode dizer das auditorias de pré-demolição?
Parece-nos a nós que ajudamos a capacitar o território, quer do ponto de vista físico, mas também do ponto de vista de educação, chamemos-lhe assim, para os munícipes, para os fregueses, mas também, sobretudo, também das próprias empresas que deram aqui uma ajuda também significativa.
Consideraria uma nova candidatura a um futuro EEA Grants?
Naturalmente aqui o Baixo Alentejo continua a ser um território com muitos desafios no âmbito ambiental e na questão das alterações climáticas, principalmente somos um dos territórios mais expostos. Naturalmente estamos sempre disponíveis para tentar enquadrar os desafios que temos no território com os financiamentos adequados. O que eu sugeri da parte do EEA Grants é que, de facto, do ponto de vista burocrático, aliviassem um bocadinho estas questões, porque torna-se às vezes muito pesada a gestão do projeto, especialmente nas entidades líder. Se nós os conseguíssemos libertar esses recursos humanos para implementar algumas das soluções no projeto, sejam mais úteis, parece-nos simplificando os procedimentos, pode ajudar a implementar melhores soluções para os territórios.
E acerca do projeto Adapta Local CIMAC, o que é que tem memória sobre ele?
O principal objeto do programa foi produzir 14 planos municipais de adaptação às alterações climáticas para os 14 municípios do Alentejo Central, tendo depois uma componente também de sensibilização e de capacitação dos técnicos municipais que participaram na co-construção dos planos. Os planos com que os municípios agora estão dotados, elencando uma série de medidas prioritárias e de uma estratégia de adaptação, permitem que os municípios e a CIMAC, no âmbito de outros programas de financiamento, tenha já uma maturidade diferente e mais robusta para elaborar candidaturas e projetos futuros. Estamos atentos à nova programação dos EEA Grants CADCEPA 21-28, creio eu, que está ainda em fase de negociação, e estaremos atentos, principalmente, e dentro das nossas responsabilidades da Unidade de Ambiente e Desenvolvimento, procurar projetos que permitam também cumprir o que está nos planos que fizemos com o financiamento dos EEA Grants e todas as ações que ajudem a melhorar a resiliência e a qualidade ambiental do Alentejo.
Como é que tiveram conhecimento do Programa Ambiente e do EEA Grants para este projeto?
Nós tivemos conhecimento dos programas EEA Grants no decurso de projetos anteriores, onde desenvolvemos trabalhos com adaptação às alterações climáticas no setor do turismo, nomeadamente com os hotéis. Nesse sentido, quando identificamos esta abertura para a economia circular e tendo em conta que estávamos aqui a fazer uma aprovação técnica europeia de um sistema inovador de uma construção pré-fabricada modular, pareceu-me de todo oportuno aproveitarmos esse conhecimento de base que tinha alguns materiais que poderiam ser melhorados e mais desenvolvidos para dar resposta a estas preocupações da economia circular e do ambiente, e nesse sentido desenvolvemos esta candidatura do Circular Beyond que nos traz aqui hoje.
E em termos de sustentabilidade deste projeto, eventualmente com outros financiamentos ou com o financiamento do EEA Grant, por exemplo, o que é que poderiam fazer para lhe dar continuidade?
Conseguimos desenvolver um conjunto de alterações de materiais, de validação deste conceito e desta solução construtiva e, portanto, este é um produto que hoje em dia está no mercado e poderá ser utilizado na construção de habitação e também de edifícios de comércio e serviços.
Como é que esta dinâmica entre os parceiros também poderá continuar ou não? Como é que isto funciona?
A dinâmica com os parceiros permanece, com o Cluster Habitat estamos a desenvolver as declarações de desempenho ambiental desta solução construtiva. Com o RISE na Noruega também se continua a trabalhar no sentido de acautelar os aspectos da segurança contra incêndio também nesta construção. E, portanto, este projeto surgiu um conjunto de laços e de relações que vão perdurar para além do final do projeto.
And in terms of the future of the EE grants, would you consider to work in a project supported by the EE grant?
Yes, I think we very much will benefit from this project in the near future, because the main activity that we did in the project was that we developed an education program for our young people in Nordhordland, aged from 13 to 16. So they are now helping us going out in nature, mapping the ecosystem services, and we have done this like a citizen science project, so they will report back to us what they found in their near nature when it comes to the different ecosystem services. And that will help us learn more about our nature, but also engage more young people in our work. So we are very pleased that this project could last for a long time in our biosphere area.
No acompanhamento dos 60 projetos, teve uma equipa da Secretaria-Geral.
A team of the Secretary-General was monitoring these 60 projects.
Testemunhos foram
The testimonials were now encapsulated in a short video that we'll show you now.
Foi desafio profissional e pessoal de que me orgulho muito. A Alexandre e ao Marco, muito obrigada pela confiança. À equipa, muito obrigada por nunca ter me deixado desistir e por continuar aqui comigo. Bem-aja a todos, até sempre.
Tenho gostado muito deste projeto e, para além disso, tenho gostado imenso das aprendizagens que temos vindo a fazer. Espero continuar a contribuir com este projeto e contribuir com esta equipa.
Chegar ao fim e congratularmos com os resultados atingidos e ter aquela sensação boa que é que valeu a pena, reconhecendo todas as dificuldades.
A equipa teve uma capacidade brutal de se ir adaptando, de ir aprendendo, tivemos todos que aprender imensas coisas novas. Tenho um saldo positivo do programa Ambiente, porque foi de facto muito enriquecedor.
Sabemos reconhecer os resultados de todo o trabalho que esta fantástica equipa tem desempenhado e agora veremos o que o futuro nos reserva para o próximo mecanismo financeiro.
E agora, melhor do que nunca, estamos prontos para um novo programa Ambiente dos E-Grants.
Para manter-me a trabalhar nesta equipa fantástica, muito obrigado pela oportunidade. Força E-Grants!
E agora sim, a fechar.
And now, for the closing session,
Muito estimulante.
after such an interesting morning, I would like to give the floor to Emílio Sousa, the Secretary of State for the Environment.
Muito bom dia a todos. Queria cumprimentar
Very good morning to all of you. I would like to greet the Secretary General of Environment and the Ambassador of Norway, one of the donor countries. For us, it's a pleasure, and we would like to express our gratitude to the support provided by the donor countries. We would like to thank all the project promoters. I was positively contaminated with your energy and excitement. If I was on your shoes, I would be even more joyful because you did an outstanding work. I had the opportunity to listen to some of the guest speakers, and in this short period of time, I realized the size of the challenges ahead. There will be the Environmental European Council, the European Green Deal, many challenges on the economy side, and I think that some of you recently attended the two COPs. I was in Azerbaijan and in Saudi Arabia, the latest COP on desertification, and we have huge challenges. I was expecting to see countries with a lower level of development in comparison to Europe, but actually what I found was the business and money moving to that side of the world. Currently, Europe is facing economic issues, lack of competitiveness at the global level, and this may impact our targets in terms of sustainable development and environmental protection. And actually we cannot and we should not slow down our efforts. While in terms of competitiveness, it seems that initially we are in disadvantage vis-a-vis other economies, but this is the short-term perspective, because in the mid and long run I think that these efforts and these initiatives can be a competitive edge for Europe. These challenges were made worse or were compounded by the wars, the ongoing wars. I think that we don't have any other alternative. We live on the planet Earth and we need to nurture our planet. Climate change, extreme weather events are more frequent and severe. In Portugal, particularly, we have the droughts, we have the wildfires, frequent wildfires, which are also related to the species of trees that we have. And recently we have the flash floods in Spain that caused 230 casualties and resulted in significant damages. This is to show that this is indeed a strategy that should be followed. I would like to thank again the donor countries, particularly Norway. Thank you for your cooperation and thank you for helping us trailing a new path. I observed the presentation of some projects. These are remarkable, they are very innovative and unique. And then, regarding applied innovation, I think mankind throughout its history has shown that it's able to overcome challenges no matter their size if we work together, if we join forces. We want to preserve the quality of life that we have so far. We have the perception today that this should be compatible with the ecosystems, with the environment, and so I do hope that EEA grants will continue financing this type of projects. And let me tell you that in Portugal we are indeed very creative. Quite often we are good on the planning stage and poor on the implementation phase, but if we are fully committed, we are able to achieve outstanding results. So we count on you, we count on your support. These projects are indeed innovative and can catalyze other projects elsewhere and can contaminate positively other regions of the world. Thank you all. Thank you, the donors. Thank you to the team of the Ministry and the Secretary of Environment, and thank you to the promoters.
Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, damos por concluída.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our session. Now I would like to invite all the participants for a lunch, which will be served right here. A lunch that we hope it will be very special. You'll have music and poetry while having lunch. Bon appétit!